Hi. By the title of this video, you may have guessed, today is my birthday. If you are coming here from my TikTok post, thank you so much. Hi. I genuinely cannot believe that I'm 28. And the reason why is because I kind of took a look back at 10 years ago, where I was in life, and then 10 years before that. And it's just so strange. And along the way, I have lost a lot, lost myself a lot, lost people constantly in one way or another. And in today's video, I wanted to do a little bit of reflecting here with you, and especially focusing on the last 8 years. The journey through my 20s has not been linear, but it has been necessary. And with that, I would like to start just by saying one person's journey at 28, what they have accomplished, what they have been successful at or lack thereof, does not negate my journey. It doesn't negate yours. Everyone's process is different. Whatever people have overcome many times is not spoken about online, especially all of the bad stuff has not been kind of put in the focal point over the last several years. If you've been following me for some time, you may know, and if not, you're about to, but I have lived in 3 different states. I moved from my birthplace, New Orleans, Louisiana. I moved to Houston, Texas. And then from Houston, Texas, I moved just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I never expected, one, to ever really see myself in a city like Houston, and then also never seeing myself here on the East Coast. But that is what worked out in my life. And it only came after I surrendered to it. It wasn't like I don't want to say, because I left, was so hopeful whenever I moved from New Orleans. I was so hopeful about Houston, and I had all of these big plans and ideas for how my life was going to go. And whenever it was time for my life to catch up with my ambition and I fell short, I kept thinking, I am doing something wrong. Like this is me not trying. This is me giving in too easily or giving up too quickly. And honestly, even though I was in my mid-20s at that time, I was really naive about it. I was really naive about what I thought was going to be like the next step actually sent me in the complete opposite direction. And I didn't want to share any of that online because, one, I didn't want to admit defeat myself. And it took me a while to realize that I wasn't defeated, because a delay is not always a rejection, and a rejection isn't always an ending. And realizing that when one door closes, quite literally another door has to open on the other side. You're not just stuck in a room in between for long unless you really want to be. And so getting myself kind of out of the mental gymnastics between going from feeling like I was a failure, between giving myself grace. I was somewhere in like a limbo in between for a lot longer than I could have been, or should have been rather. And I really forgot who I was, because I had never been anything outside of what I was always, if that makes any sense. Like, I knew who I was aspiring to be, but because I had never seen those steps taken before, and especially because I had never been in a situation like this before, it left me very, very confused and pulled in a lot of different directions. And I believed if I just wanted it enough, that it would happen, then and there. And it didn't. It did not happen then and there. And so I had to reevaluate a lot of things. I had to reevaluate a lot of my expectations. I had to reevaluate a lot of friendships as well, because I am a big believer in not speaking things too soon, because unfortunately there aren't always a lot of good intention or good-minded individuals. At the time I didn't know it, but that I was surrounding myself with. And so I left Houston very deflated. And when I moved to North Carolina, I felt this is a chance for me to really figure out what it is, like what the hell I want out of my life. I need to figure out, I need to reconnect with nature, because I love the outdoors, and I'm near the mountains and like all of this, and I really, really desperately wanted to figure out, where do I go from here? I'm starting from scratch, and not seeing that as a bad thing, but seeing that as a beautiful, clean slate that I could work on myself. And the last few years has presented, the sum of the last few years rather, has left me with a lot fewer friends. There are people who I went into my 20s with that I am no longer with. And also an individual or two that I met mid-20s that I thought would be with me a lot longer are not. And having to accept that it didn't work out, accept that I like to call it my chosen family, accept that my chosen family were actually not going to be with me for the length of time that I believed wholeheartedly that they would, was a disappointment. But I was also disappointed in myself, because there were signs and things that I didn't want to see, cycles that I was repeating that I didn't want to acknowledge that I was at the time, that were showing me that these individuals were not actually my people, but I wanted so badly for them to be. I wanted so badly to have a community. I wanted so badly to have that family that I felt I curated, that came into my life just long enough for me to realize that they were not going to be what I thought we were going to be together. So it's kind of like an expectations versus reality type of thing. And I've never really been a big fan of reality. And unfortunately, reality has always tried to chase me down. And I feel like this is an opportunity for me, coming on here and talking about this and making my content, to really be more honest with myself and more open with you. And I hope that I'm explaining myself clearly enough, because to me it makes sense, but I know sometimes it doesn't for others. So next, I kind of wanted to talk about my job experiences and how in my 20s I put up with a lot more things than I should have. I worked for about 4 separate jobs that really did a number on my mental health. One of them was the last job that I had whenever I was in Louisiana, and I dealt with a lot of people from the complete opposite aisle of where I was politically. And I say politically kind of in air quotes or literal quotes now, but they were very, very adamant on almost reminding me of my place. And I didn't think that that was acceptable. And that was one of the reasons why, because at the time I was just really like new to TikTok, and people would acknowledge at work that they knew about my content. And I've always been very protective of it, although I am like a public figure on the interweb, but it always felt like my content was very precious to me. And being in a situation and an environment where it was brought up and then made fun of, and it just wasn't healthy. It just wasn't a healthy environment. And so whenever I moved to Houston, it was really a fresh start. I didn't know anyone. I could go and do as I pleased. I leaned into my content and it was spectacular. However, my process and journey into becoming a full-time content creator was not one that was as linear as I thought it would be. And I, again, was naive and wholeheartedly believed that I could go into this and get all of the brand deals and do all of that. But it wasn't like that. Like, my process on getting brand deals and securing enough finances to support myself was just like not possible. And I had a small business at the time, and TikTok, which was and remains my largest platform, was actively suppressing. I know I like a good conspiracy as much as the next person, but it actively suppressed any type of external direction. So if you say link in my bio, if you say my website is of whatever, it would flag that and then not push those videos out. And so as many orders as I did receive, and I got so many people supported me, and I'm forever, ever, ever grateful, but it wasn't enough to sustain myself. And so I had a couple of, different jobs while I worked in Houston. However, there was one job right before I moved to North Carolina that I left because for the 90-day probationary period, that was the most blatant. They tried to mask it, but it was the most blatant intimidation I have ever received. It was almost as worse or almost as bad as my job in Louisiana, but I ended up being on the receiving end of a nice mean. So they were nice to me, their tone was nice, but it was also condescending. Their actions seemed to mean well, but it was also a trap. And I plan on doing story times as well, working that into this, and I'll go all into detail about it. But that job also reminded me that they knew about my TikTok. They told me my first day, they were like, oh, we'll take you out to lunch. I went to lunch, brought up my TikTok immediately. And so my one platform, again, that I felt I should be able to go and like talk about anything and everything, I didn't have autonomy over that anymore. My choice was taken from me because I knew they would use it against me, as they actively were, by just telling me that they knew about it and that they followed me and all of that. And it took several weeks, but I finally I had enough. I just had enough. And the process of me leaving that job was nothing short of spectacular. And the story time on that will be a nail biter. But all of that to say, I had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to choose myself. And every time I did, because I never saw that reflected growing up, of personal bodily autonomy, choice, it was very foreign to me. And so when I did it, I felt bad for doing it, but I also felt bad for keeping myself in situations and environments that weren't good for me. if that makes any sense. So yeah, that was that. And then, you know, I moved to North Carolina, and a lot of things were challenged in me whenever I got out here. My grandmother was hospitalized. My little sister she's in her teens now, but she'll always be my baby sister. But she has had things going on at her school, and we don't have the best parental figures. And I'm being very generous by saying that. And so it's been like I've been torn between going towards who I'm meant to be, redefining that constantly because I'm ever changing. My interests, my passions are ever changing, but my morality, my sense of self is always consistent. Like, I'm consistent in the fact that I know that I am a person of integrity, but I'm also really like challenged on a daily basis with a lot of external forces. And so it leaves me, or it left me with severe anxiety to the point where I was medicated for the first time. I kind of found myself coming full circle. 10 years ago, I was in an altercation with my father, and that really, really messed me up for some time. And I don't think I ever acknowledged that, to the extent of I went to therapy. I said all of the things that I needed to say. But in terms of processing it consistently, that's never been one of my strong suits. And so being able now to realize and recognize, like, oh, I have things that I addressed in passing, but I still carry some things with me. So I may take some things out the suitcase. Like, I love a nice visual. That's something I learned in therapy. Like, having a nice visual helps me work through things. But let's say I have a suitcase pulling behind me, and every now and again I stop, I unpack some things, I leave it on the side, but I still carry, I'm still pulling the suitcase along with me. And the suitcase is encompassing all of my trauma, all of the things that I've never worked through. And while simultaneously I'm taking things out of the suitcase, I'm putting new things in, because that is the human experience at the end of the day. It is constantly being traumatized and healing, and then being re-traumatized again with something brand new, and then challenged to make sure that you're actually healed. And it's really left me now on the eve of another solar return, or at this point, on my solar return. I'm 28, and I realized that everything that I used to want, everything that I felt drove me, actually ended up doing more harm than good whenever I actually tried to reach it. And it's a shame, but at the same time, I'm trying to practice gratitude more. I'm grateful that I have the lesson again placed in front of me, because I know that it's meant to show me something more. I'm meant to be more, and I'm meant to share more and not necessarily shy away from it. And if I could give any advice, if I'm even remotely qualified, even a teensy tiny bit, and if you're watching this and you resonate with any part of this, I can only say, listen to yourself. Even if you don't know who you are just yet, listen to yourself, but try with everything in you to find people who you can, in some way, shape, or form, find something in them that you can aspire to. Not aspire to be them, but find people. Because growing up, all I saw was a lot of people that I didn't want to be like. And I never saw anyone who I wanted to be like. Not really. Not that I knew personally. Of course, there are superheroes and stories and books and characters that, you know, are made from the minds and creations of authors, but the authors aren't always a reflection of what they write. You know what I mean? There are people who write horror books. It doesn't mean that they're Pennywise. Finding something in those stories, in those characters, in their traits, finding those in yourself, but also finding those in the community that you inevitably will build throughout your life. And also being okay with things not working out how you kind of think that they would by now. And the concept of time is in and of itself something I will spiral into in another video, as I spiraled into it many other times on my TikTok. But the constraints of time, other people that you might think have everything that you want and you feel a bit of envy, try to change your perspective and try to work towards whatever you believe they have that you want. Try to work towards it and try to connect with those people and talk to them and hear their stories and recognize that their journey is completely different from yours, or it might be similar, and knowing that that's okay either way. So, all of this to say, today I'm 28. 10 years ago, I was 18. 10 years before that, I was 8. And 8 years before that, I wasn't even born. I am very, very grateful for all that I have, all that I have lost, all that I will have. And the desire that I have to move forward is only because I know that there are other people in my life who I've lost in one way or another that did help me get to the realizations that I'm at now. So I'm excited though. I'm excited for 28. I was excited for 27, and 27 was a year of immense challenge, as was the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. But it was also a year of incredible, incredible growth. It was a year that I was not, or it's been years that I was not expecting things to end how they did, but I know that they had to end as they did because it was meant to. Yeah, I thank you for watching, for spending a bit of time with me on my birthday. I was debating with myself on if I was going to do a birthday post or not, and I just decided, debate over, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not something I'm trying to work on. I'm not going to worry about the count, you know, how many people see this, how many people don't, if people comment, if people don't comment, or things like that, just because that is out of my control. And things that are out of my control, I have learned I have to put my hands up. It's above me. In all seriousness, I do want to really focus my attentions on the things that I have not been attaching myself properly to. I want to read again. I want to write again. I used to write all of the time. I want to visualize and dream, but also have a little bit of the truth of reality come in, because it led to a lot of pain. It led to a lot of pain when things did not work out the way I envisioned them to at the time that I envisioned it to. But I hope that you found this insightful. I did. A lot of the times I talk myself through a lot of things, but then I also talk myself out of a lot of things because I talk too much. But I'm excited for 28. I can only be hopeful that things work out as they're meant to, and nothing less. So, with that being said, I'm Monica Strange. If you haven't, Follow me on all of the places. I appreciate all of the support that I've gotten over the last few years. I don't know who I would be if I hadn't made the decision to actually get on here and do it. So, thank you for watching. Have a stellar day.